Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today is March 18, 2026. I want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Also want to thank Carolyn Casey for introducing me to today's guest, Eiren Caffall. Caffall. I knew I was going to
Caffall, baffle. I know it looks like it should be so much more complicated. It is a common mistake.
Where are you calling from, Eiren?
Chicago.
We had so much fun, or I did, and I learned so much in part one, which we did October 1st last year.
Oh my gosh, was it that long ago? It was a great time.
And there's so much to cover, and I want to jump right into it. This is my brand new question. So in 1967, Mel Brooks won Best Original Screenplay for The Producers. He beat out Battle of Algiers, John Cassavetes' Faces, and Kubrick 2001. And one of his main protagonists is played by Gene Wilder, and he's named Leo Bloom after Leopold Bloom in Ulysses. And Gene Wilder says this line, "I want everything I've seen in the movies." So what I'd like you to do, Eiren, is say, I fill in the blank. I want everything I...
Oh, that's a stumper right out of the gate. I want everything. I want everything that I have access to be available to as many people as possible.
Beautiful. That's the universality. You're generous.
And also, I feel like I had this incredible experience recently where my book was chosen as an all-town read in Westport, Connecticut, which is a town that has a lot of resources from its tax base. And I went to their library, and I can't stop thinking about it because it was a fantastic library, and it was being clearly accessed by everyone in the region, whether they were from the town or not. Yeah. And they had thought very carefully about things that they needed to give to people. A makerspace, a podcasting studio, training on using recording equipment and video equipment, a speaker series and a big lecture hall and a generous children's library, all of these things. And I can't stop thinking about it because I thought about how much that could have been a space that felt exclusive and unavailable to the community because of the town where it was located. But instead, it had every type of person wandering the library. I was there for hours, and it was open to the community and in conversation with the community. And it made me think about how much we silo resources like that so frequently, and they really, they need to be democratized and available to everybody. So that's just not left my brain for the last couple of weeks since I had that experience.
I love the word because I call it library because I go to the library every day of my life, and it's the Marina Del Rey Library, and it's just a beautiful space, and it means so much to me. It is really just this amazing. It's like breathing. So I really appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah.
And Rebecca Solnit was in the New York Times Sunday Magazine. And she said something I'm curious because I might ask a question that I already asked in part one. I try to catalog it so I don't, but if I did,
okay.
Basically, I'm going to ask you the question is, what's the difference between narrative and storytelling? But here's what she said.
What did she say?
She says, well, they ask her, well, you're kind of positive. And she goes, my friend calls me the Hope Lady. And, she's a realist, I mean, she goes, but what you're addressing is narrative itself. This is Rebecca speaking. She says, most stories are something goes wrong and then you have to address it.
Yeah.
When nothing goes wrong, there's no story. But also a lot of what's right are stories of increment. So it goes off. But I'm just mainly this thing is it really something goes wrong and then we have to address it? But when nothing goes wrong, there's no story. I mean, just that thought off the bat. And I know it's out of context, but just your thought.
I mean, it's probably out of context for sure. And I have not read the interview, although I've bookmarked it. She's a huge inspiration for me. I read A Paradise Built in Hell when I was trying to write my novel, and I just thought that research and that way of looking at collapse was so much the way that I thought about collapse, that
Yeah.
I felt seen for the first time intellectually, in that, like, I want to talk about what we do to make a new world after the world collapses, right? So I'm obsessed with that idea. And so is she. And she's the hope lady. My husband says that I need business cards that say bad news delivered kindly. And I think that those are very similar ideas. There's also a line in my book that I get, that the best thing about being read is that strangers, new friends, quote you back to yourself all the time. And the one line that gets quoted back to me all the time is, greed and hope are twins reaching for the same thing, one in fear and one in faith.
Yeah.
And I think for me, like, narrative and storytelling, I feel like, are different things. Every kind of article or essay has a narrative to it, even if you're doing straight reporting. Storytelling to me is when we invest an emotional relationship and artistry and sort of the grand tradition of, like, what it is to be a human being, where we contextualize through poetry, through our sense and our voice, the story we're trying to tell. Like, it's an art form that's really beautiful. And when writers are at their best, I think we become storytellers. When filmmakers are at our best, we become storytellers, right? That tradition begins to live in us again. And I think that you can make story out of lots of things. But yeah, I think I would agree with her in that sense that we're always trying to make repair. And many of the times when we tell a story to ourselves or to each other, it's about that moment of rupture where we couldn't go on the way we were and we had to repair something. And what does the repair look like? And is that, I needed to leave my small town, or I needed to, discover the cure for an illness, or whatever the story is that we're trying to tell. We want to give each other that particular healing moment, I think, as we're making narrative and making story for each other.
No, that was really good, Eiren, and I appreciate it because you are concise and articulate in your wordsmith. So it was really, you painted a picture for me that was beautiful. I spoke with this gentleman who was raised with Bob Dylan, like in high school. Then he became his road manager, and then he's a religious dude now. And he says, someone told me the difference between narrative and storytelling is that narrative doesn't lie. So I like how you suss those out. But I'm not saying he's right or wrong. I'm just, what do you think of that thought that narrative doesn't lie?
I don't know if I agree with that. I think that I mean, and as a writing teacher, I use the phrase narrative all the time, because I'm trying to get people to think in terms of, narrative can be made up of just bare plot, right? A narrative of your life could just be the events that happened. And so I think almost every story has a narrative to it. There is narrative in most of the art forms that we choose to tell our stories through. But then what moves the narrative from being a bare recitation of events into something that's a piece of art or a piece of moving storytelling? I think those are different things for me. And I think you can train people to understand how to make a narrative in their reporting, and that's really good reporting when there's a narrative that the reader can follow, but it doesn't necessarily rise to the level of storytelling to me. And I don't think that you can necessarily trust that every narrative is going to be telling the truth. Lots of people construct a narrative in order to support nefarious ends, let's just say. I feel like there's a lot of folks out there that are like, you know what, I'm going to tell you how things happened like this so that I don't have to take responsibility. That's a narrative. So
you really tackled that well. And I'm going to do a little side tangent because I know you're a lover of music and film. And Peter Greenaway said cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers. So usually, because your dad worked with Yoko and know experimental film a little or a lot, I don't know how much, but my question, I'm going to ask the question, but it's really, I want you to talk about that because there's abstract literature. There's abstract literature. So So the question I ask the filmmakers are experimental filmmakers telling stories a different way or doing something completely different? And then the punchline is Andrew Noren says, dude, if you put one frame next to another, that is narrative. So
Yeah.
if it's gobbledygook abstract and gobbledygook abstract, you're seeing one frame out. So
Yeah.
that's sort of interesting. But I think the overall sentiment that Peter Greenaway is saying is an interesting one, because cinema's only 130 years old. TV's only 100 years old. And all it has been basically is filming theater. That's what do. So your comments on cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to
storytellers. Well, I think that there's so many people who make cinema who feel, and writers too, who feel allergic to the idea that we are storytellers, because I think that can become a very fuzzy term, and it's a pop culture kind of term that I think sometimes blunts what we do, right? And so it doesn't always. I don't feel allergic to it in the same way that I don't feel allergic to the word hope. Like, I think those are both very useful terms that are sometimes dumbed down and feminized and sort of like demonized because they have a more empathetic, open sort of tone to the way that the language works. And a lot of people become allergic to thinking of their art form that way because, you know, especially for, I mean, a very powerful filmmaker like Greenaway, I think there's a real, like, let's reclaim the masculine energy and the drive of filmmaking, as opposed to it's not storytelling. But I think that what people are doing when they make film, and I think this is true of music too, I think it's a different way of approaching kind of the dream logic and emotional logic of human life, where it doesn't, you know, I work in language as a writer, but one of the reasons that I worked in music for so long was because I understood that my relationship to language could become very abstract and very intellectualized and could be very research heavy, and that I could go down that road if I let myself. And that if I was going to be working in a medium that insisted on the immediacy of emotional connection to the listener, that I would change as a writer, because I would begin to understand how language could be kind of be in relationship to the same work that music does, right? Which is provoke an emotional response in the audience. And film, I think, does that too. Those two media really get at something deeply unconscious that goes beyond creating narrative meaning, necessarily intellectual narrative meaning, and go towards creating emotional or psychic or sort of like a deeper narrative meaning out of image. And I love when experimental filmmakers do that. I love when Greenaway does that. I watched a ton of Greenaway when I was in film school in college, and, you know, learned so much about that sort of precognitive emotional manipulation of the artist at the base level of sound, image, color, movement, and then learned all those lessons over again in terms of like music, rhythm, melody, you know, all of those instrument choices, all of those things that you begin to learn as a musician. And I think it's helped me to be able to move from medium to understand that I think what produces meaning can be so very different between the media that you choose.
Yeah. Again, really good. And I want to get into music. Here's one on education.
Okay.
Just in 1957, Marshall McLuhan said in Classroom Without Walls, it's misleading to suppose there's any basic difference between education and entertainment. It's like setting up a distinction between didactic and lyric poetry on the ground that one teaches and the other one pleases. But it's always been true that whatever pleases teaches more effectively. So two parts is there a difference between education and entertainment? And what is it if there is? And this line, whatever pleases teaches more effectively.
I mean, again, I feel like, and this was my experience the first time we met, the questions are so enormous that I feel this very pleasant experience of being dwarfed in the face of them. It's beautiful. It's a great experience because it's like, oh yeah, these are the big fundamental questions that we need to be asking ourselves on the regular. And for me, I've been an educator for as long as I've been an artist, almost. I mean, I think I was more, you know, I was a young artist, and then as soon as I started kind of thinking about myself professionally, I was also teaching at the same time. And as a person who's really obsessed with climate collapse and communicating about climate collapse to the general public, getting science into people's brains, getting urgency into people's active lives, it was always really important to me to figure out what was going to connect information to the audience most effectively. So
Yeah.
I thought about it as an educational project. And I tried for a really long time to write my books from a purely educational project, which is, I'm going to make sure my research is ironclad and I'm going to deliver this information in very like concrete terms, and it's going to be very science writing heavy and very factual, and I'm not going to be in it very much. And I started to realize that while I was reaching people, especially other people who were interested in that same sort of subject area, there was a whole swath of the population that was never going to connect with the material that I was laying out because there wasn't a beating heart to it of maybe the entertainment of learning about my life, the empathy production machine of storytelling that was going to need to be there if people were going to stick around for the things I wanted them to know. And the things that I wanted them to know were not just about, ecological collapse in science. They were also about the meaning and the importance of every life, even if there's somebody that is living with a chronic illness. I couldn't get people to connect with the material as deeply as I wanted them to in a way that they remembered and felt unless I began to edge in the storytelling parts of things. And so to a certain extent, the final version of my first book really ended up being that idea. I'm teaching something, but I'm making it a pleasurable experience where you feel connected to the story because you feel connected to the people, because you feel connected to the narrative, the place, the whole thing. And I've found that as an educator as well, that like what I'm doing when I'm creating an educational space is not challenging my students, but I'm thinking first and foremost about what the experience of gathering together as a cohort of learners feels like. Because when we are together in a space where we feel seen and heard and we feel like we're building a community, we're more apt to take in information and to learn. And so in that way, if the space pleases you, if the people, if the open-heartedness of the instructor pleases you, I don't think it crosses over into just purely entertainment. I think there's depth to it. But then I also think that there's many entertaining things that have a great deal of depth. They're not antithetical to each other. And I think that in the best spaces, they go hand in hand, that educators that are really gifted are thinking about the impact of their work on their students in the way that you would think about an audience if you were making a piece of art for them. You're creating, you're curating, and you're co-creating with them something that makes it more possible to retain the information that the educator wants to get across.
So well put. I love that word, co-create. And it's funny because 90% of people go, yeah, I like that. Whatever pleases teaches more effectively. And one guy finally shot in about a month ago. He goes, no, whatever displeases teaches more effectively. I'm like, the beauty is that we can think all these different ways. And when you brought up the word hope and it was demonized, and you're like, I'm a Pollyanna myself. I know it. I'm a Hallmark card. I'm like, why not have positive attitude? That's accentuate the positive. But my one friend said, hope is for sissies. It's like, you saw that big picture and you go, even though I see this picture, I can say my bias or my feeling. And that's what I like.
Yes, hope is for sissies. Yes, because that traditional, again, feminizing of the response to an emotional experience, we actually need the vulnerability that's inherent in hope. It's important. It's essential. That's how we connect with each other.
Totally.
It is in our vulnerable spaces.
It's those two words you used them, vulnerable and empathy. They're just like, I just want to go over those two words forever and ever.
I know. I know.
So, Eiren, what's the function of music?
Oh, gosh. I feel like it's an emotional engine that's underneath every single thing in the world. And I think it's a deep spiritual reaching out and a way of articulating everything beyond the intellectual realm across time and space and between every person on the planet. It's this incredible universal language that we're so lucky to have that is an engine of empathy, and it's an engine of connection, and it's an engine of history, and we get to engage in it, and it becomes this instantaneous connector between people. It's magic. And in fact, I think that there are a lot of people who are writers or other types of creators and artists who often feel really jealous of the immediacy of music and the kind of universality and the way that music can travel so completely outside of its creator out into the world. I had a friend back in the 90s when I was first starting to make music, and he was at the time a travel guide. He got paid to go and take people to, this is early 90s. So you could go to China with this tour group, and he was on an airplane in China, and its engines went out, and he was convinced he was going to die. And everyone on the plane was convinced they were going to die. And the plane started dropping precipitously through the sky. And he said, at that moment, what came to me was a line from a chorus of a song of yours that I heard a few weeks before. And then the engine miraculously came back on. They landed. Everyone lived. And he wrote me a postcard from the airport with this story on it. And I kept it. I actually don't know where that postcard is now, but I kept it for years because I think that is the thing we most want as human beings, is to know that, something we've thought, said, made, sung is going to be there in a moment when someone deeply needs it. And music has that a bit. Like I love that that's what shows up for me when I'm in a moment of real sorrow or weakness, is that there's a song that emerges. And having gotten to make music for people and to be able to use that as a medium for as long as I did, just every day feels like a gift, even though it's not the medium I'm primarily working in right now.
Beautiful. And I wanted to go into music just a little because the function of music I've been surveying for a while, and I'm going to list these off really fast. But any of them you go, wait a minute, or you say, hey, I can respond to that, or, add to it. My first favorite is there's no function of music. Igor Stravinsky gave lectures on music means nothing. And then John Cage says he learned from his Eastern philosophy teacher to soothe the soul and make it susceptible for divine intervention.
Oh, that's beautiful.
You sort of touched on spiritual.
Yeah.
Mickey Hart, the drummer of the Dead, said it's a warning system. I'm going to hit the logs. I'm going to steal my food. Thing. Survival. Dylan Buston said it's to dance, which I really wanted to ask you really quick. Your dad was a shaker?
My dad was a lover of shaker philosophy and furniture, and maker of shaker furniture.
Right.
So he never joined any of the shaker communities. He was married happily, father, the whole thing. He met some of the last remaining shakers in the 70s, but really what he did was study as much of what they did in terms of their woodworking as he possibly could, and then just start to try and reproduce that. He worked only using hand tools for his first 10 years as an artisan, and he was really instrumental in some of the museum curation around what became like Hancock Shaker Village, and his reproductions were sold at the Met when they opened their shaker wing. So he was really just an incredible artisan. And we had this huge collection of his books on shakerism and other utopian projects. And because
that new movie, The Testament of Ann Lee, it really captures some of the shaker dance. And there's, again, the New York Times this past Sunday, there was a big article on, and it basically said one line that just really stood out, that shaker dancing is feeling the truth of the soul through the body.
Yes.
And, it's that trance thing. So then another friend says, the function of music is keep you from going insane. And I love David Moss says, it's the sound of being alive.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And it's all the ones we know: entertainment, pleasure, nostalgia, creativity, connection, community, ceremony, ritual, learning, stir emotion. But these two, I'm curious your thoughts.
Okay.
Brent Fisher, self-awareness, and this goes along with it. Another friend says, the function of music is to hypnotize people to be themselves.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
How does that self-awareness and hypnotize people to be themselves. I don't even get either of those that well, but I thought you could suss it out a little what that
I
means.
love both of those. I think they're really great because I think that, and it's the same thing that we're talking about in terms of the divine, right? What you're trying to do is open the channel, whatever the channel is, right? If it's a channel to nature, if it's a channel to the divine, if it's a channel to the community. But I also think it's one of the deepest channels to self that you can open because it's pre-verbal, it resists intellectualization, it lives in the body, it can live in dance. The act of making it is a profoundly physicalized experience. Most musicians I've ever known and met are very like they have a hard time talking about themselves or their emotions or they're not so interested in that part of it. But if you put them in an ensemble and ask them to begin to create, they create the most incredible complexities in terms of emotional truth. And that's because I think some part of them is being trained at all times to make that channel that then becomes a channel for the other people. I used to say I had terrible crushing stage fright for the first maybe 5 or 6 years that I was a musician. And I would be great in the rehearsal room, recording studio, no problem. But I would get on stage and I would just get the shakes. And it would be hard for me to play my lap steel guitar. And I got really good therapy for it. And one of the things that my therapist asked me to work on was the idea that part of what made me overwhelmed in that moment was stepping into the role of being essentially a column of light that moves from below, from the divine, from something deeper, from something that all humans need out into the space where you're creating and an audience is perceiving and other musicians are happening. And everybody on stage is a column of light. And I think when music is working well, everyone in the audience is also a column of light. You are a pathway for something so much larger than yourself. And so I think, though, that process, just like meditation, it teaches you what the difference is between your thoughts and yourself, your emotion and yourself, the divine and yourself. It's a training ground to be able to recognize self in a new and more generous way, and a way that's more connected to the rest of humanity. And that's what I tried to learn to feel in the moments of performance, was just how everyone needed that moment to open themselves up and to become lighter and better able to perceive the truth of their own experience.
Beautiful, because those two words, open and self or identity, were main themes in part one.
Yeah.
Frank Zappa's hero, Edgar Varese, said a function of music is organizing sound. He says he emphasized timbre and rhythm over the traditional melody and harmony. So here's my question. Aaron Copland divides the four main elements or ingredients of music into melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. No, there's probably more, but just those four. How do you, or when you were writing music, playing it, how did you know to focus on which one? Did you have a favorite? Was there a navigating between the four elements, melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color? Anything on that?
Oh, that's really interesting. Well, I think that one of the things that's, again, a huge gift to me of having been a musician for as long as I was, is that it really taught me about collaboration and about, what it is that you're capable of doing by yourself and how much better it is when you are, again, open to the possibility that other people are going to bring things in. And so my focus when I was a musician was mostly on melody and language. Those were the two things. I was thinking about melody. I was thinking about language. I was writing the primary melody for all of my songs. I was writing all of the lyrics for it. But the great alchemy of the work didn't happen when I was writing. I would come with a written piece into the rehearsal room, and then the band I was working with, who were all just some of my dearest people still, would take what I had made, and then they would add tone. They would add rhythm. They would add color. One of my dearest friends was my bass player and my sidey, my side musician. So she sang all the harmony, and she made all the decisions about where the harmony needed to go. And it was in conversation. But it was she is so gifted at harmony that she could just feel where it needed to be to create the best version of that particular song. And my producer, who was a multi-instrumentalist, would know what was the color we needed to bring in. Does this require a harpsichord? Is this going to be something that's better with a violin? You know, like all of those choices were things that he was gifted to see what the arrangement needed to be. And the same thing with my drummer. I wouldn't know what to ask for in terms of the rhythm that was going to be appropriate for that particular song. You would know if it wasn't right, but more often than not, it was just this invitational moment to say, here is what I have made, right? What do you see in it, and how do we create it to be its best self? And that was just the most incredible part of being a musician, because it taught me that every piece of art that you make, somebody can come in with other flavors, other tones, other directions, other ideas that can begin to build on the thing that you've made, because that's what their particular gift is.
Yeah, collaboration is such a key word there for me.
Yeah.
I'm working on a project right now with a kid who's like 50 years younger than me. And I find he's like, oh, I don't know if I said, look, dude, I want this to be 50-50. I want you to collaborate. And I felt he was maybe a little shy or something. And then out of the blue, he says, no, we should do a spoken word part in here. You can do it. And I goes, oh my God, it was so cool. He proved himself to me, because he proved himself in so many other ways. And this was just like flip right back in my court. So I love that word, collaboration. My friend says the 3 T's of music are technique, theory, and taste. Technique, you learned how to play the instrument. Theory, you knew the structure. How does one acquire taste?
Oh, I mean, I think that's just what you are. Like, you can't acquire it. It's just, I don't think, and I think that the trick is not acquiring taste. It's an exposure to be able to begin to narrow down. It's an editorial process, right? Before, I was super lucky. I mean, I was born into a family of bohemians, and 4th generation bohemian here, right? My kid is 5th generation. Like, we go way, way back. Everybody's been refining their taste over generations. So I walked into somebody who was ready to curate for me a smorgasbord of possible options of my own taste. Most of us have to fight our way through pop culture and lack of exposure, but I don't think that somebody gives you your taste. I think they give you that plate full of possibilities.
They give you the plate.
And then you decide, like, okay, I prefer this one, or I don't, this is not for me. And I think that's the beautiful thing, is that, like, you refine it and refine it and refine it. Just like as an artist, you refine your voice over and over again. You have this, possible anxiety of influence, because the thing that you read first when you were 19 got at something in your taste, and you were so excited that you wanted to, I wanted to be Toni Morrison. You know what I mean? Like, all I wanted to do was be Ray Bradbury or Toni Morrison or any of the people that I fell in love with as a teenager. And those people still live in my psyche and still live in my taste, but I'm refining what my voice is over the course of decades. And I think that that's true about taste too. And it's internal. Some people are just very lucky that we happen to be born into a family where every Sunday is jazz day. And so we get to learn about Dexter Gordon really, really young, not everybody gets that.
You're such a great listener, and I appreciate it, because this is a hard one, and it carries over from that word taste. It's McLuhan said, song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference. So usually I try to get people to just get an idea of what he might have been saying in the second part. Usually if they hear that first part, song is slowed down speech, they go, no, it's not. They can't get it. But, he's poetic and metaphorical in so many ways, but they think he's being a theorist, and he's not.
He's not.
So any thoughts on that? Song is slow down speech. The reason cultures have different musical tastes is ultimately connected to language difference.
I mean, I think that one of the things I really wish I could kind of go back to in my own training is that I would have studied linguistics more and had a better understanding of the way that language and culture connect to each other. Because I feel like I have that handicap that a lot of us do, which is that raised in a colonialist culture, we really don't quite understand the connection between culture, language, perception, You know, we've been in the dominant culture so long, and we only understand those questions through the domination of our culture over every other culture on the planet. And so it's really hard for us, if we aren't trained in it, to be able to unpack that material and that understanding. But I think that there is, I mean, obviously there's a huge connection between how we produce our poetry and the lyricism of our particular set of language, and the experience of, you know, the place where we're raised and born, and the culture we inherit, and what kind of trees are there, and what kind of water we get to listen to. And I think all of those things are so connected, because, you know, music is this huge spiritual uprising out of the body. It's this column of light for the community. And so if language is arising from the community, and it's, you know, its terroir, its location, its deep, you know, connection to wherever it was born, and what exigencies there are in its necessity, right? All of that is true in the music that's made out of that culture too.
There's a line that you just said that hit me so hard. The water we listen to. So one of my friends is an architect in like Canada. And we, in the Joyce studies, we go, if you could ask James Joyce a question, what would it be? And he said, I would walk alongside a river with him and ask him what he's hearing.
Oh, that's a great one.
Isn't that amazing? Because, you know, could you explain this or that? No, it's like what the water we listen to, because that is an amazing thing, to listen to water. Usually you look at water, but, you know, to listen to it. So what's more fundamental, music or language?
Oh, I don't think there's a way to separate them. I think I mean, and again, there's questionable ethics of this particular writer, but one of the books that really influenced me when I was a college student was The Songlines by Bruce Chatwin. And one of the things I loved about it was not necessarily even his perspective or his sort of, you know, masculine writing, but the way that the second half of the book was just examinations of walking in particular cultures, and also song in particular cultures. And I think the way that song and language and space and place and culture, they're just so inextricable. I don't think you can pull free whether language is more important than music or music more important than language. They're the same thing. And, you know, and so I think that's part of why we get obsessed with bird song, or we get obsessed with other styles of communication, or, you know, the way in which the very fact that we talk about great literature as having a lyricism to it, like we can't think without each thing being in communication with each other.
You know, I'm a dumpster diver, and one thing I cherish is I can find books all the time. All these industry yuppies throw out amazing books, and I dumpster dove that book a couple weeks ago, and I have to be very discerning because it piles up. And then I looked at it and I goes, this book looks important. And I couldn't throw it out. It's like, I know I've heard of it, but that's the title, The Songlines.
I know. I was given it by a friend of mine. We were both studying abroad in college, and I had been in Denmark and she had been in England, and we met in France, and she basically walked me to a bookstore, bought it for me, inscribed it, and put it in my hand. So it was one of two books I was carrying around with me on my Eurail pass that whole summer, like going to all of these crazy places. And I remember sitting on a boat, a ferry going from Italy to Greece with my boyfriend at the time, and just reading aloud to each other from these passages about what it meant to travel and what it meant to walk, and sort of the human and anthropological questions of walking, and the human and anthropological questions of song. And it was just like it was a very transformative book in my life that I've not really gone back to, because, again, Chatwin is not without controversy, but the way that book curates so many important human ideas about the interconnection between, you know, walking and music and thinking and place just has never left me.
Cool. Eiren, tell me the name of an instrumental that makes you laugh, because you said melody and harmony, which I know you said melody and language. So I says, oh, I can't wait to ask this question.
An instrumental, so something without lyrics to it.
No lyrics, no
that makes
words.
me laugh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a really good one. I mean, I gotta say, I keep going back to the Four Seasons recently.
Yeah.
So I would go with either Autumn from the Four Seasons from Vivaldi, or I would go to Dave Brubeck's Time Out, maybe the first 2 tracks, because
Oh,
every time I hear them, all I think of is like that sort of joyful burbling up of feeling that I have every time it's autumn, because I'm a New England baby. So like it's my favorite time of year, and it's like it just feels so joyful and full of energy, both of them.
beautiful. This is 3 questions that you can also apply to your writing.
Okay.
As you will. Ruth Draper said, the key is to bring the audience onto the stage and into the scene with you. It is they who must give you even more than you give them in the way of imagination and creative power. Sounds good. How do you do it? Either as a musician or as a writer.
I mean, I think that you have to assume that every act of your own creation is co-creation with another person. And so when I'm writing, then this is a good question to ask me right now, because I'm in the middle of the second draft of my second novel. And so first draft me is trying to get the plot, make sure everything is there, make sure that the research is there, and leave breadcrumbs for second draft me. And second draft me is coming into every scene that I've written and asking that fundamental question of, have I left the audience, the reader, enough openness here so that they can co-create the emotional moment that is key to this scene? And so that means inviting in terms of pacing and dialogue and detail and tenderness and character development to make it so the people who are reading it fall in love with the characters as much as I do, where I don't hoard what I know about them behind a sort of a writerly distance, and it unleash that tenderness that makes the reader want to fill in the gaps that may be there from my failures as a writer, to flesh out the person that they're falling in love with me. And that's a real intimacy that I'm asking for on the page, but it's an intimacy that doesn't finish until someone reads it. And one that has been really overwhelming in the year plus that my book has been out, to meet people who have had that experience and who will sort of grab my hand in a space in public and say, oh my God, Keller, what an incredible character. And that's because I left as much intimacy about Keller as I possibly could there for them to find and finish with their own love of people in their life that they know, ways they've felt about their loved ones, where they've felt about people that they grew up with or that they have experienced. And as a musician, I think what you do is that you remember that the most generous gift you can give to an audience is familiarity and repetition in the openness that you create in a song, so that people can begin to use. We love to be able to finish a phrase both in rhyme and in melody that we feel like we know where it's going, and there's such a deep pleasure to that we feel like we're making the song with the singer, with the songwriter, with the band, with the musicians. When you allow that to happen in a song, where you find what's pleasurable to you and to your band in that moment, you pretty much know that that's an invitation to ask the audience to find it as pleasurable as you do. And that's the co-creation moment, where you're all in that anticipatory moment of repetition and release together.
Wow. That's like George Clinton, Parliament Funkadelic is my hero. He has 30 great vocalists on stage, and he holds the mic to the audience and they sing every word.
Yes.
And it's like anthem rock to the max, but it really is, you feel. But you just articulated beautifully my mantra, which is McLuhan updated medium as a massage or medium as a message mid-career to the user is the content. He got it from Joyce. He said, aren't my consumers my producers? So they got it from the symbolist, who got it from Edgar Allan Poe, who invented the detective novel. I'm only giving you so much information, and you have to fill in the blank.
It in.
You got a book right there.
It's so funny. And when I was trying to, I spent a really long time writing my novel, but I also spent about 6 years on my my first book, my memoir. And one of the things that I really struggled with was how much of myself to put into the book, how much intimacy to allow the reader to engage in, exactly what I'm talking about. Like, how much am I co-creating with somebody that is going to come to know me or me as narrator in that book? And when I would struggle with it, my husband would say to me, you are the argument.
Yeah, wow.
And I loved that. And it's never left me. I tell my students this all the time. There is a way in which you have to trust that the people who are going to engage with your work are going to be tender and gentle and safe with it, right? That it's going to be met with that same sort of relief that people feel when they see themselves in you and form that relationship with the story or discover that relationship, that synchronicity, that serendipity between your story and theirs.
You anticipated the two next questions.
Oh, I
Beautiful.
did? Okay, good.
Leonard Cohen, the only way you can sell a concert is if you put yourself at risk. And if you don't do that, people know.
Yeah,
What
they do.
what role does risk play in your creative
Oh
process?
God, everything. I mean, that's the thing is you have to be able to be like, you have to like summon every bit of your own bravery to think my vulnerability is someone else's transformation and their transformation transforms me.
Yeah.
And if I take that first leap, I will be held in the space and the generosity of a group of observers, of co-creators, of audience. And if you don't do it and you're holding back, the audience will not trust you. They won't know that you're holding back because you're afraid or you're shy or
Yeah.
you don't really know what you think yet. They'll just sniff it. They'll know. And I think for me as a writer and as a musician, the better I got was the more that I was willing to just trust that my openness was safe and that open door would transform me as well as it transformed my interlocutors in the audience. Like that has been the greatest gift, is that every time I feel like I might be fearful about like, well, but what if I show up as my authentic self and it isn't, and it's dangerous? I mean, I write about climate change. I could walk into rooms where it's scary to be this person, right? And yet, the more that I'm open about what I feel, the vulnerability, my own connections to it, the more that I'm rewarded with other people's gratitude for that vulnerability and then their willingness to risk their vulnerability next time. And it's part of what I try to model as a teacher, is that the more that you reveal, the more that you heal yourself, heal the other people who are experiencing it, and the more that we actually transform what it is to be human in public. I think that
Yeah.
those walls don't do anybody any good in the long run.
It's such a weird flip because 99% I asked, what role does risk play? Oh, it's huge. And one guy who's a lead singer for Zappa for many years, Napoleon
Yeah.
Murphy Brock, he goes, I leave risk in the dressing room. And I was like, wow, that's a great
Sir.
statement, because what I think he was saying was, I have to come out and feel like I'm confident and act like
Yeah.
I'm confident, because
Yeah.
he's playing very complex music that's written, but he also had to improvise with Frank on lyrics on the spot. So there's and the amazing thing is he still plays at 85, and he does his longevity on eating manuka honey. So but here's
Okay.
one from a great Chicago person.
Okay.
Viola Spolin?
Oh my God. Yes, that's who trained me as an early teacher. Not personally, but I read her book cover to cover when I was learning.
So here's her line, and I love her. If the audience cannot see your struggle to achieve something, they cannot root for you to achieve it.
Yes.
What role does struggle play in your creative process?
Oh, everything. And again, it's that thing of like being at peace with the vulnerability of watching people struggle. And I tell my students this all the time. Your audience, your readers do not care what the answer to the question is. They want to watch you ask it.
Yes.
Because asking it that's where the struggle is. They want to know that, especially in the line of work that I'm in, if I came into a space as a writer or a speaker or an educator and said, I know what to do about climate change and your fear about it, I would be laughed off the stage
Yeah.
because I don't know what to do about it. And I don't know what to do about you being afraid about it, except I know that we're better when we confront both questions together, in our fear, in our vulnerability, in our moments of hope, in our moments of curiosity. And every time we do that, we move the ball forward because we make it more possible to ask more interesting questions and support more people to be more creative about what the solutions are. But my struggle and it being there is what makes it feel universal and accessible. And it makes it feel to people like it's not terrifying to say, I'm going to work on climate change, because you don't have to go into that space and say, I'm going to work on climate change because I know what to do, right? You can walk into it and say, I know what to do about being here with you in my fear and yours, or in my hope and yours, or in my anger and yours. And it's that's what changes things.
Yeah. McLuhan's mantra was new questions, new metaphors. And I love George Lakoff saying, we've got to use the old tools, the existing tools, and invent new tools.
Yes.
So it's really important. Now, I spoke with Michael Apted, the filmmaker, 45 years ago, and I says, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? Most people don't know Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922, but it flourished in the 80s with MTV, to the point where Marty Scorsese says, I cut my films faster because of MTV. So Michael Apted said, because we've learned to take in information faster. I asked this with a bias. Can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
No, I think we can learn to take in information faster, and I think we can learn to train our brains for whatever the visual rhetoric is, even the sound rhetoric of any particular moment. Like we learn to absorb it. And I'm raising a Gen Z person, and so I watch videos that are made for that generation a lot more than I expected to. And the humor and the way that information gets delivered and the swiftness of it, it has a vernacular that's different than the vernacular that I grew up on. And it feels to me faster, it feels to me more complicated, but it matches what they have trained themselves to be able to do. So I don't think there's it's not to infinity. We can't keep taking in information more swiftly, but we have access to more, and we're capable of beginning the process of learning to absorb information younger and younger with more and more structured education. And so I think that changes the way that our brains are wired to be able to absorb and interpret things as it comes through.
You're an advanced teacher. I'm getting a big lesson here, because I wanted to hear your thoughts on this theory. My friend says TSA is tactile situation awareness.
Okay.
So when the person's flying the plane, a bomber, the plane gets hit, they don't have time to study every gauge. They have to act on the spot. And he says that's what Gen Z's, or what did you say, Gen Z is.
Yeah.
They're watching 5 screens at once, and they're not identifying to one of them. They're getting the big picture, like you said. By being with your son. My friend, who's a great experimental filmmaker, she watched everything all at once.
Yeah.
When her son said, "Finally, Mom, a film you're gonna love," and she's after 10 minutes, she went, "I can't take it.
It's too much information coming in."
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Well, and what I love about this generation too, having taught them and parented one, one of the things that I think is fascinating is, like, you would think that what that means is that they're just absorbing it as a soup and they're not differentiating and they're not going deep into anything. But actually, I think the exact opposite is true. I think that part of why they absorb information in the way that they do and seek it out like they do, and that multiple screens or multiple gauges at any one time, is because they're trying to make meaning out of such a vast collection of history and experience. And they are so curious about what's the meaning of things. And so, like, even when they're absorbing, like, 90s stuff with in jokes that are from the 60s, my kid will be like, okay, what did that mean? What was that a reference to? Where did they come from? What is that pun? What does this? And when we were, we went to go see the Yoko Ono exhibit that was here in Chicago at the MCA a couple of weeks ago before it closed. And it was the same thing. It was like, what's the context? Explain Fluxus to me. Like, why are we watching this video of butts? Like, all of that, and I've seen this in my students too. Like, there's a there's a hunger to be able to make meaning of that constant bombardment that
Yeah.
they're experiencing all the time, of just like massive change, pandemics, fascism. Like, they need to know what they're seeing on the gauges so that they can react quickly and in real time, so that they don't get fooled, they don't get drawn into something that they don't want to be drawn into. I'm just so impressed with them all the time.
The hidden question really, Eiren, is, can humans literally multitask?
I mean, I don't know that you're asking the right person that question, because I feel like, as a person with a neurodivergent brain, I find that I have to distract portions of my my busy mind, so that I can get work done.
Yeah.
So I often am listening to a podcast or a book while I'm writing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think multitasking is, I think the question is much more about, like, what's your brain wiring in relationship
Yeah.
to it? Like, can you?
Yeah. It's good. Paulo Coelho, you know, when The Alchemist came
Yeah.
out, it's the coolest book ever. And he goes, dude,
Yeah.
this story is 5,000 years old. And they go, where do you write it? Like under a tree where it's peaceful? And he goes, no, I got to be in an office where 10 fax machines are going off.
Yes.
And it was like,
Oh my
what?
gosh. No, I love going to artist retreats. They're wonderful, but I often find that I find them too
Yeah.
quiet. I need my cats. I need my messy, full house with people. My husband and I both work from home. He's a union organizer, so I'm constantly hearing, conversations about strikes in
Right.
the background. It's great. It's very good for my
Yeah.
process.
Really cool. And what was the motive of the cave artist? Your guess or hunch?
Oh, the motive? I'm the same exact motive I have. They just wanted to communicate something about a deeply felt experience that they wanted to share with other people.
Yeah.
They wanted to represent something important for their community, a moment in time. Exactly the same motivations that we have. I don't think any of that has changed across human
That's
history.
the answer I want to hear.
Yeah.
When I ask these questions, it's funny. I want to hear a certain answer.
Do you?
But if I don't get it, it opens up my mind to think other
Right.
ways. So that's why I ask them. And this is my oldest question ever. I got it from Christine McKinnon. What is more important, conviction or compromise?
Oh, wow. I actually don't think that you can choose one or the other. I think they have to go together.
Yeah.
I don't think that I think that conviction without compromise is fascism at its worst, and is just, narcissism at its softest. And what was the other one? Conviction and
Compromise.
And compromise without conviction is, being the victim of fascism, being the victim of narcissism. Softness in compromise is essential to every single human endeavor, but conviction is what gets things to change. It moves everything. It makes art, it makes children. They're inseparable. It's like asking, is yin more important than yang?
Yeah. All your accomplishments, or you've had a lot of accomplishments. How do you rate these three elements in general? Luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
Whew. That's hard. I think most of it is luck. I've met very ambitious and very skilled people who never have their work come to light, who have made beautiful, memorable pieces of art. And those pieces of art may never see the light of day in their lifetimes, or perhaps ever. And I've been saying this year, I've been a part of a creative community for my entire life. I was raised by creative people. And the difference between, my dad's work having a very, very limited audience and my work having a larger audience is just luck. I've been trying to work on this essay that I think I'll publish eventually, that I want to call Negotiating with Lightning. Because when lightning strikes, there's a beautiful book called A Match to the Heart by Gretel Ehrlich, which if you haven't read, you should read. And it's about she's a beautiful writer about nature that lived in sheep herding territory and sheep ranching territory in Wyoming for most of her adult life. And while she was out there ranching, and on horseback out in the wilds, she got struck by lightning, and she wrote about the science of lightning strikes. And the thing about lightning strikes is that you never know which way the lightning is going to go. It can hit a tree and just affect the tree. It can hit the ground, travel through the ground, travel through the horse's legs, travel through the horse into the human riding the horse. And when it goes through the human body, it can pass through pathways in the human body and leave you pretty much intact. Or it could be the thing that happens to hit the electromagnetic system, essentially, that controls whether your heart beats rhythmically or doesn't. And it is individual to every lightning strike. And I think that that's true with success as a creative person, and maybe even outside of creativity, although that's the only job I do, really. Um, it's uncontrollable and it's unpredictable, and you can work your whole life to have beautiful skills, and you can nurse your ambitions, and that lightning can never strike. And that doesn't mean that your work isn't valuable, necessary, important to be seen and read. It's just you didn't happen to get struck by lightning that particular year with that particular project. And so I think the humility of recognizing that, like, if you know someone's work, it's not because they're necessarily the best at what they do.
Yeah. So perfect. The golfer said, the more you practice, the luckier you get.
Yeah. Yeah. And tenacity. I mean, I think more than ambition or skill or even luck, the thing that I think was really valuable for me, and I think this would have been true whether I was successful or not, was just feeling entitled to keep going.
Yeah.
Like that, and you need it. You have to have it, even if there's never going to be an outcome, even if the lightning never comes for you.
Yeah. People say, dude, I don't like your three choices. How about purpose, destiny, persistence? Now, tenacity, necessity. T.S. Eliot said, poetry's outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Oh, I think my inner dialogue still, because of my training in my 20s, is still in music. I think that when I begin a project, it's really because I have a lyricism or a set of rhythms of the story that I want to tell that shows up as musical language. Both of my novels have emerged because I got the voice of the protagonist in my head as kind of a melody stuck in it, and then just ended up making them into a book.
Wow. Two of my film heroes have this mantra, ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas, there's no self-expression. So Taylor says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Is art making more self-expression or more your vehicle for whatever technologies, cultures, and environments are dominant?
I think that no matter what you do, whether you believe that it's self-initiated or whether you believe in the absence of self, you can't make something that isn't of your time and your moment in the technologies and culture that's around you. So that's a given. But like, I think that the trick of being good at what you make as a creative person is a trick of coming to terms with ego in relationship to what you make. And I don't think that's necessarily the same thing as coming to terms with self or letting go of self. I think it's about ego being so connected to outcome that it can tamp down your ability to be a channel for something that's trying to come through you. I think Martha Graham has that great line about, like,
I love that.
That's, of course you know that quote.
That's one of my mantras. I love
I know.
that.
I always give it to my students at the beginning of a class because I just think your job is to keep the channel open, but I don't think that means self-abnegation or that you're failing as an artist if you don't let go of the self. I think the self is sometimes confused with ego and attachment to outcome, because we are trained in a capitalist culture that the only meaning to our work is the capitalist outcome of it. Did you sell a lot of books? Did you become famous? Did you, all of that stuff. And that matters so much less than whether the work is the best thing that can be made from you at that particular moment that you're alive and making it.
Well, you answered this, but I always ask it. Can art making be egoless?
No, I don't think it can. I think there's plenty of people making art that are very caught up in ego,
Yeah.
and the art is good or bad or whatever, but it's still very attached to their ego. And I say that as somebody who does get attached to my ego from time to time. I
Yeah.
know that something's really good though when I can be slightly egoless about it. And I know that I've come to terms with my ego relationship to it when I can kind of see it as a product that is finished and on the shelf, right? Like a beautiful vase I made, something that I don't need to prove and reprove, that I get to kind of experience with a joyfulness and an openness to the reader's experience, to, however it's going to be viewed and, in the course of its life as a
I,
piece of art.
I love that because that's my problem. I can never stop. I go, well, I want to do a revision and rewrite. Never. And Salvador Dali snuck in an art museum once and dressed,
And
and he started painting his own painting. And the guard says, "You can't do that." He goes, "I'm the artist." I go, "Well, you still can't do that.
still
Sorry."
can't do it. It's done, man. Oh my God. No, there's things I would go back and change about every piece
Right.
of art that I made, but
Yeah.
you gotta let it go and be like,
You
it's like
gotta let it
parenting. You gotta let it go. Like they're cooked. They're gonna go off and have their own life.
Please tell me one major element of your Eirenness, your creative output that stayed the same, and one major element that's changed.
The one that stayed the same is, I feel like, the sort of childlike beginner mind,
Yeah.
joyfulness that
Yeah.
I really remember from when I decided I wanted to be a writer and also make music when I was like 7. And I
Yeah.
have very vivid memories of going out and bringing my recorder into the field and playing for the bunnies and making imaginary maps of like imaginary countries in my backyard. Like that beginner mind of like, what would little Eiren want to, like, what's the version of the Lord of the Rings map on the wall that she would be obsessed with in the work that I'm doing right now? Like, I pay attention to her and that kind of like generative, excited energy as much as I possibly can. The thing
Yeah.
that's changed is that I actually was really anxious about lots of stuff. I had stage fright. I was
Yeah.
really afraid that I wasn't writing to my capacity. I was really shy to show people things. I was really like worried that I'd never be able to make art in the way that I wanted to. I was like very, very clenched about it. And there was and it made the work suffer because I wasn't showing up fully to it. And there was a turning point that I kind of can remember of like when I started to let that go and move forward with a lot more lightness, and a lot less ego, and a lot of like, well, I don't know what's going to happen to it. I made a weird little book. What'll happen? I don't know. Let's see.
Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's
Yeah.
literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Yeah, I mean, the weakness is the essential sort of origin story of my my first book, which is I was born with an incurable genetic disease. And
Yeah.
I inherited from my dad, and he inherited from his dad, and he inherited from his dad. It's 4 or 5 generations, 150 years in my family of people dying before they were 50, and me getting diagnosed in my 20s and told I'd never have children and I would be dead very young. And the alchemy that it took to take that information and get right with it, to get right with mourning, to get right with what I felt about my own disability, with my own potential death, with what I wanted out of my life, what I could risk, what I couldn't risk, how desperately did I want to be a parent to risk a lot of things in order to do it. All of that weakness of, the way that a eugenicist would look at me and be like, well, I had a doctor tell me, I know how to end your disease in 1 generation. People like you should never have children. That moment where I think that could be really devastating and could have changed my life in really negative ways. And what I'm proud of is that I listened to that and I was like, no,
Wow.
no, I'm going to live and I'm going to prove to myself, if no one else, that my vulnerability is not a liability. It's actually the strength and openness that's going to connect me to other people. And it took me a really long time and a lot of great therapy in order to do that. But I feel like when I work as an artist, that's what I'm channeling. It's a huge part of it is like, we will all die. I have been living with my own death since I was in my 20s. Art is ephemeral, moves across, tells stories, unites us, moves me into the future in a way that my own body will not. And it's a huge gift to be able to make it with whatever time I have. And I think that's enabled me to confront lots of things I'm curious about, with a lot more flexibility than I would have had otherwise.
Wow, Eiren. Hollis Frampton, the experimental filmmaker, said, narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die.
Yeah.
My question is, can you forget to die?
Can you forget to die? No, and you shouldn't. You should really be thinking about it as often as possible.
Yeah.
And I think that it's that I am not part of a wisdom tradition, but I admire and love all of the wisdom traditions that I've ever studied, and the way in which our relationship to the divine is our relationship to changing of matter and what that looks like, and how that alchemy moves us and our beings forward, even if it's just through chemistry, into the next phase. And in an unknowable, wonderful way. And if we don't think about it and engage with it, I think we miss doing our best work, because fear of death is the thing that drives every bad thing in our culture and our humanness.
Yeah.
And embracing it and thinking of it as something that is more complicated and wonderful and terrifying than we can hold in our beings means that we're connected to everybody else who's wrestling with those same questions. We should remember to die. I mean, I'm a big fan of Buddhists who are meditating on their death every day. Like, I think that's a great process. Me spending 5 years writing my memoir about death, and then spending 10 years writing a novel that's very much about mourning, I feel like a lighter, better, more alive person than I was before that, because that fear, I mean, I'm human, it's never going to go away, but I feel like I have a relationship to it. I'm friends with it. I don't kick it out of the room when it comes in. And that there's a huge amount of power in that.
Beautiful. Fill in the blank. Anger can be a productive emotion when.
Oh, you have found my Achilles heel. I am so trying to make peace with anger and find my relationship to it. In fact, the whole novel I'm working on right now is all about that. And I think it can be productive when you know how to think of it as a safe and important energy that we all need to survive. I don't know that I have a relationship to it that's like that yet. I'm still pretty fearful about anger, and I would like to not be. But man, is it a necessary thing for human existence.
Yeah. My friend wrote comedy with Robin Williams, and I asked him, can satire be destructive? And he says, that's the job of satire. But if me or you do a cartoon in a certain country and they kill us, some people think dying's bad. Jonathan Swift said he compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own.
Ooh.
What's the function of satire?
Oh, gosh. I love that idea that satire is destructive and that that's necessary, that it's its job. I've never really thought that much about it, because I don't personally, I have a friend who says I'm not funny. She's one of my oldest friends. She's very funny. And for a while, my family was counting up how many jokes I'd made over the course of like a decade. It's pretty small. And I don't remember jokes very much. So I have a lot of people that I love who are practitioners of comedy in one way or another. And I think that their ability to, and I also grew up with parents who really loved satirical song and satirical movies. And I feel like it's one of those things that I am not ever going to be a practitioner of. Like, I do not know how to do it or have a relationship to it, but I love seeing it done, because I think it takes things apart that need to be investigated. We need to see underneath structures and systems, and satire is a really good, swift kick to a lot of structures that probably need to be taken apart.
What's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
Oh, I think that it's just the major difference between men and women is based entirely in culture.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's really anything inherent biologically, spiritually, physically, emotionally, really, that's very different in men and women. I think that what we are allowed to enact and experience and live with and live through as men and women is so culturally freighted, and we live in such a deeply polarized culture that doesn't really celebrate the intrinsic power of masculinity or femininity. I had early on in the interviewing processes for putting out my novel, I had somebody say to me, all of the men in your books are just such, like, they're just so bad at everything. Was that intentional? Did you mean to make a matriarchy? And thinking about it, I was like, I don't agree, first of all. And secondly, I think that if I'm writing men or women to be portrayed as inherently more capable or more likely to be the savior in a situation, then I am not doing my job, because I have never in my day-to-day life met anyone of either, or, you know, all the genders, who was more inherently capable in one way or another. We're so differently socialized, and we're so badly socialized in this culture, that I think we don't actually have any idea of how to talk or think about gender properly. And I think this next generation that's coming up, and again, back to Gen Z, I think those are a group of people raised in this particular set of hegemonic and patriarchal rules that are really trying to figure out how to get free of, you know, empirical or essentialist notions of what gender is.
Again, I appreciate how articulate you are. What caused matriarchy?
What caused matriarchy?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that matriarchies really exist when we see a culture that inherently provides the natural power to women that they possess. And I think we have this way of talking about matriarchy as if it means the same thing that patriarchy does, which is, in the way that it's practiced in this culture, as a domination force. And I don't think matriarchy ever was a domination force in any of the cultures that ever practiced it. I think it was really just a lot, again, going back to the Shakers, a lot more like what Shakers practiced, which is there's brother work and sister work. And we can talk about how those things might be different, but we don't have to talk about them as privileged with more power in one form or another.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I asked Peter Sellers, that opera theater director, and he goes, a mother holding a baby. And I was like, that's amazing, because of the power. But it's really what Maria Gambudis spawned in Rian Eisler, Chalice and the Blade, partnership.
Yeah, that's exactly.
It's cooperation. So there's a line that goes, you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into, you are what you hate. James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. and Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. So how do you react to this? I'm not saying you, but one creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that line?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that's absolutely true. And I think that, I mean, I think of it in creating much more in terms of like what kinds of things you call into your life that you are going to have to wrestle with. I mean, for me, I really spent a long time trying to form a new relationship to my worthiness because of this early diagnosis that I mentioned, whether I was worth being a partner, whether I was worth being an artist, whether I was worth, you know, being paid, being alive, taking up resources. And I had a real chip on my shoulder about whether I deserved to be alive, as I said with the story with the doctor, but I also really recreated spaces where I didn't value my own worth as a human being. And it was just over and over again, I feel like I come back to that same thing that I'm wrestling with, which is, you know, does a disabled body exist and deserve to exist? What's my worth as a disabled person, as a person with an illness? And I keep recreating versions of that over and over again that I'm constantly wrestling with.
Beautiful. My nephew's special needs, or his sister goes, he's not special needs, he's special abilities. You know, he's the only one in our family who walk down the street and say hello to everybody. And it really is the amazing person. So these are 5 quick Alan Watts questions off the top of your head in just a couple words.
Okay.
1, who started it all? See, you are funny. You laugh. I love it. That is a funny question.
It is, because the image that immediately comes to mind is just standing before the abyss of creation. How can you know?
Yeah. 2, are we going to make it?
Yes.
3, where do we put it?
In our hearts.
Dude, that is my most favorite answer. I get it about every 3 or 4 years. I'm like,
really?
Waiting. Oh, I'm waiting because it's so evident. We're going to put it. I mean, believe me, I love that. Okay, 4, who's cleaning it up?
Women.
Oh, wow. 5, is it serious?
Yes, it's deeply serious.
Really good. Okay, a few more. We got about 10 more minutes. I love this, Eiren. I wish it would never end. Okay. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Oh, honey. I mean, I think I would just start there and I would just ask, do you need a hug?
Oh my God.
She did. Sweet girl.
Hugs. That's what my mother taught us so much. Hugs are healing.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're physically and emotionally healing.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. If a publisher was going, well, you kind of done this, but if a publisher was going to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
I mean, the one I chose was The Mourner's Bestiary.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'd have to think of a new one.
Well, here, let's leave it there. If your publisher, when you put that out, said, we want to scent the glue and the binding, what smell would it have been?
Oh, pine needles and sea spray.
Oh my God. If a statue is built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
Oh, I would want it on the little island that book is about, Monhegan, and I would like it by what they call Swim Beach, and I would want it to be carved out of a boulder from the region so that it could get washed away over time by the tides.
Beautiful. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Whoa. Something good I never had and I never want. I mean, this one is totally a stumper.
Oh, yeah. Wait until you hear where I got it.
I mean, something good that I never had and I never want.
Yeah.
Okay. The view from a spaceship of planet Earth.
Yeah, that's good. I never had that answer. That's good. It's from neuro-linguistic programming, you know, NLP.
Oh, yeah.
And you watch their eyes when you ask them. And if they go up, you're this kind of person. If you go down there,
that's fascinating.
I just took it out of context. I just think it's it's
a great question, because the thing is that I mean, what an incredible thing for human beings to see planet Earth, but I don't actually want to go to space. Yeah.
But you know the answer I get the most? The 3. Fame, money, and heroin.
Wow.
Now, isn't it tell you something about humans in general? I mean, it's sort of interesting.
Yeah, fascinating.
Utah Phillips said, anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Who's entitled to make the rules?
Oh, I mean, I think that rules making is a co-creation and it has to be a negotiation constantly.
Yeah.
Like the community has to be able to talk through what the rules are all the time and reevaluate them.
Reevaluate. Beautiful. But the interesting thing is the wording Utah used is exactly the etymological breakdown for the word freedom. one's rules for one's own self.
Yeah.
What does freedom mean to you now?
I think freedom is just joy, being able to embrace joy, being able to feel enough relief of anxiety, fear to be able to find joy.
This one's from Marcel Proust. On what occasion do you lie?
Oh. I mean, very rarely. I actually have a really hard time with it. I lie by omission. When
Yeah.
I'm too afraid to tell somebody something, that's mostly.
Yeah. Yeah. This is about living in the moment. It's like really with you, I feel like I'm in the moment, and it's around the word archive, which etymologically breaks down in 1400s, keep safe, free from harm. But 1600, it's record preserved as evidence. So the question, and I'm going to set up a little more, but the question is archiving more innate or more invented? And do you have plans for your own archive? You know, Charles Baudelaire said, if you try to make a statement long, deep, and rich, it will age very fast. If you try and only own the day you're talking, it will last forever. Isn't the point of life to be here now? Like Ram Dass, live in the moment. And Wyndham Lewis said, artists, and I don't like to be elitist, just artists live in the moment and write a detailed history of the future. You know, I like the ideas of archiving. I'm making a film on archiving right now. Like I said, go to the library every day. But I also like the idea that the futurists said, burn all the museums and libraries. You know, in other words, why do we have to collect all this crap? You got boxes of stuff in your house, and you know, when you died, your family and friends know what to do with it, and the bottom line is you know that the Egyptians put stuff in their coffins with them.
Yeah.
So do you think this need or want to archive is more innate or more invented?
I think it's innate. And I think it's innate because I think that we do actually really intend on preserving what we knew and understood. And Egyptians had things in their coffins, but they also made hieroglyphics that they carved into stone that was going to outlive them. And they knew that it would. And I think for me, I mean, nearly my entire novel is about the duty to the future that we have in retaining information from the past and carrying it forward towards the world that we want. That's what archiving does, is it preserves information that may be useful to the people that are going to come after us. And so as the inheritor of a family legacy, you know, I feel like I'm in a relay race with all of the generations that came before me that I didn't get to know as an adult because most of my family died very young. And so I'm carrying forward what I can hold on to and also what I can glean from their past experience. I think archiving is essential. I also am working on a nonfiction project kind of lightly in the background as I finish this novel that involves an ancestor. And I've been able to go into her archives. And there's 13 boxes of her letters and materials that are kept in an archive in a university. And that act of reconstruction and reimagination and renegotiation with history is incredibly essential to who we are as human beings. I think it's always been part of how, I mean, back to the cave painting question, right?
Exactly.
You know,
but do you have plans for your own archive?
I mean, it's funny. I have a joke with my kid about like my kid being my literary executor after I die. And the other family joke is that the goal is not to be rich or famous or have like a huge output necessarily. The goal is to be famous enough to have a museum of our household. So like I did a great residency at the Malay colony and got to be, you know, in close proximity to Edna St. Vincent Malay's house and writing cottage. I'm currently thinking about Ursula K. Le Guin a lot because I'm reading her again. And her house, I subscribed to her, to the Instagram account for her house and archives, and just thinking about what it is that we leave behind in terms of a legacy of our work. It's a family joke, but I think I love the idea that there might be something in the materials that I leave behind that might be useful to somebody someday, a scholar. It's been useful to me to find that kind of scholarship in the lives that have been lived before my own. And it would be an honor to be needed in that way by future generations in whatever capacity.
Love it. Thank you. Eiren, what's a question that remains unresolved for you?
Oh, what's a question that remains unresolved for me? I think the question that remains unresolved for me really has to do with how do we increase the amount of openness and hopefulness and lack of fear in this particular culture to slowly and deliberately wear away at colonialism, capitalism, patriarchy, and create the beloved community that I think we all really deserve. How do we continue to do that work and not get discouraged while we wait and while we incrementally move ourselves forward?
You stress this word openness. I have to tell you, there's this Taschen book on alchemy. In the last page has my two heroes on one page, Marcel Duchamp and James Joyce. And it's some quote from Finnegan's Wake. And then the artwork by Duchamp is a door in the middle. It's a door that's in the middle of a corner of a room. So the door opens to, there's only one door, but there's two doorways. So, you can't shut both doors. So it's like the epitome of openness, or you just open and you got two rooms coming.
Yes.
So it's just so fun. Now, how has writing shaped your behavior?
I think it's made me someone who, I think it's shaped my behavior in terms of discipline in a really interesting way, and observation. It's changed my understanding of myself enormously. And it's turned me from someone who was really run by a lot of fear into somebody who trusts work and time a lot more than I did before. And it's made me much more disciplined. It's done similar things to what the swimming pool has done for me, which is that I know that I feel better and am better in the world and more useful and purposeful if I engage with this thing that brings me so much joy every day.
You mean you swim daily, or you swim often?
I swim multiple times a week. And when I'm away from swimming that frequently, I notice that I'm less present in the world. I'm less useful. I'm less effective. I'm less pleasant. And it's the same thing with writing. There's an essential discipline to it, to participating in something that feeds me so much and also removes me from self so reliably, that it makes me just a better human being day to day.
Amazing. It really resonates, because my mother was a swimmer, and it was just, you could tell it was because she had really bad hips, and they replaced her hip and then replaced the other hip, but she just kept swimming.
Yeah.
Really beautiful. Two more and we're out of here. This is so fun. So Thornton Wilder in 1928. Art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. I'm glad you laughed. You laid your cards on the table for over 3 hours, more than that. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
Oh, I mean, I think that that's a great way to put it. I don't think that I'm revealing and hiding at the same time. I think I'm trying to get into deeper relationship with what I actually think and feel all the time. I find it really hard to understand in the moment what my own emotional responses to my lived experience is. It's really hard for me to parse. I find it the same thing about understanding myself as I do about understanding the world at large. And the more that I engage with trying to answer my questions about myself and about the world, the more I feel like I've actually come to understand myself. And I'm not making a piece of art, especially in memoir, to tell people exactly who I am. I have many things that are private and will always remain so, but I'm trying to get at an essential truth of my understanding of what my human life tells me about the world as a larger entity, and to share that with other people so that they can see what my own life means, but what theirs does too. That connection, that thread that unites us over time and space.
So well put. What gives you the most optimism?
I mean, everything, actually. I think what gives me the most optimism is going out into nature, because I feel like the sense of the constancy of repair and regeneration, of new solutions, of the habits of thousands of generations of return and reinvestment and hope in survival is there every time I go into the woods, into the forests, into the ocean. And so I think when I'm having a moment where my optimism in humans or my optimism in my country is lagging, it is the rest of the world. There's this really, I referenced this in my memoir, but I'm going to mention it too. One of my favorite children's books when I was a kid, and still is a book called Grover and the Everything in the Whole Wide World Museum.
Yeah.
And it's about Grover going to a museum, and it's a museum of everything in the whole wide world, like soft things, hard things, cute things, fluffy things. And we follow Grover through his experience of seeing the entire archive of all the things in the world. And then he gets to the end of the museum, and there's this giant door, and above the door it says everything else. And he opens it up and walks out into the world. And I feel like I think about that moment all the time. I think of that moment of like, oh, you've cataloged everything you can hold in this building, everything you can understand in this moment, in this lifetime. And then there's the door, and that door is to everything else.
That is so. It doesn't end there. It's like my favorite is this. I know I've said it, is the quote from Mallarmé. Everything will end up in a book. Everything in the world. And then there's the end of the book where it says, and there's more.
And there's more. Exactly. Everything else.
Everything else. You know, the first question I asked in part one is, what's the best thing for a human being? You said openness, and you demonstrated that. Wilhelm Reich says the best thing for a human being is another human being.
Yeah.
And the last question I ask is what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. What gives you the most optimism? And he said, other people.
Yeah.
So it's sure been fun spending this time with another person. Again, I want to say, I don't want this to end, Eiren. It's just fun.
It's such a joy, Gerry.
You've been very generous with your time and energy. And it's like I went to a master class on writing, and, you know, I really appreciate it.
It's been a joy.
Yeah, even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button again, I will say, I hope this never ends. We can keep talking forever and ever.